Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging field of data science. We bring the best minds in data, software engineering, machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now here are your hosts, Frank Lavinia and Andy Leonard.
Hello and welcome back to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging fields of data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. If you like to think of data as the new oil, then you can think of us as, well, car talk, because we focus on where the rubber meets the virtual road. And with me on this epic trip down the information superhighway is my awesome co-host, Andy Leonard. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing well, Frank. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm actually at the office today and found a nice quiet spot to record.
Nice.
And just got off a pretty interesting meeting, talking about all things soups and nuts about kind of big data, IoT, transportation, drones. It's fancy. Yeah, to quote Hunter Thompson, I feel like I'm on the main nerve.
I like it.
What's new with you?
Oh, well, I have a new toy.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Are you
Alexa,
going to introduce us?
Say hello.
Hello.
Nice. So I understand that you have, I think you just published a skill, or you will have it published shortly, certainly by the time people are listening.
I hope so. Yeah, I don't. So this brand new to me. I set up this feed thing and did a quick audio, which I'll be mentioning here at the end of What's Up With Me. But yeah, I've been playing with, I got a Spot, an Echo Spot.
Oh, cool.
It's got a cute little screen on it, and it tells me things like the temperature here in Farmville and stuff like that. So it is, and I'm working on one for us. I would love for us to be able to have a skill. And that sounds bad, doesn't it?
I was going to say, wait a minute.
Okay.
So for those that are
Alexa
listening,
skill.
yes. So those that are listening, Alexa doesn't have skills; it has apps. I mean, wait. Maybe we should say that.
Yes.
It does not have apps per se. They call them skills.
Right.
So, comes with some in the box like weather, timer, but you can add skills. So, for instance, I wrote a skill after attending, they had like a workshop in DC. So if you want to know all about the happenings in Germantown, Maryland, there's like a skill I wrote that'll tell you like where to get coffee, good place to eat, that sort of thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I was just modifying a JSON file.
That's it.
Yeah. Now,
go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say probably the same thing. I mean, the one I set up for me, I was tinkering around with, well, actually not for me, more for enterprise data and analytics. But I set up a similar one for Data Driven, and they're both flash briefings. So flash briefings are nice. I picked a few. I've got a handful. I've kind of picked my way through and said, yeah, I want to hear that one. No, I don't, after a couple of times. Some of them are just too long, but I like to listen to some stuff about business. You'll enjoy this part, Frank. You know how I hate news, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like to. Well, it's not that I hate the news. It's just when I listen to it, it makes my blood pressure go up. And that's unhealthy. I'm almost 55. I got to watch my blood pressure and stuff. But I started doing a news flash briefing from Europe. Mm-hmm. And that one surprisingly does not make my blood pressure go up. Now, here's the thing I noticed about it is just to check, I actually ran a few days with a couple three, some from here and that one from there. And the ones from here made my blood pressure go up. The one there did not. Yeah,
the American news media has become, it's more like a circus meets reality TV show. It's like, yeah. I like to call it, actually, because they play one of the news networks at every Microsoft office. So every time I'm in, I'm like, I just get my eye rolling exercises done.
I visited that Microsoft office last week. We got to do that data point in person for the 50K downloads. That was astounding. That was great. Frank, do you have any big announcement, trumpet, fanfare, sound effects? I know you've got a bunch.
Let's see. Is it dramatic? How about that?
I kind of like that.
Good, isn't it?
So I could say, I feel like I should get close to the microphone and talk in a deep voice. Well, sort of. So just, it's not soup yet, but the next release of BIML 2018, is in release candidate mode right now. They've announced it on Twitter. The BIML heroes have been kind of running release candidates for a while, betas and release candidates for a while now, but it's really cool that they're this close. They released one late last night. For me, it was like after dark, which is crazy late for me. And so I got it this morning. I've installed it, but I haven't tested it yet. I've got to put it through the tests, the things that I've been waiting for. But one really cool feature with BIML Express is that now in the free version, you can take an SSIS package and reverse engineer it. Basically, you can turn it into BIML.
What?
So, yeah, and it's free. So, wow. Previously, and I want to say in July last year is when they released this feature, they added the preview window to BIML Express, which means you can type in the upper window and kind of code your BIML, and then and I'm not sure exactly what triggers it. I think it may be doing it in real time, but certainly you can save and it will regenerate what you've written. So if you've written, say, a BIML script that says loop through all of the tables in this database and build, some BIML based on that, and maybe there's like 10 tables in a database, it'll show you down in the bottom screen, the preview window will show you like the BIML it's going to generate for 10 SSIS packages if you're doing one package per table, which is what I recommend. But now, yeah, the reverse engineer, what they call the convert from SSIS, that feature is going to be in the in the next version. And it's actually, I've used it a couple of times in demos. I've shown it, and it's impressive. I'm very impressed. I'm really impressed. It's free. But so there's three products: BIML Express, which is free; BIML Studio, which is like an integrated development environment just for BIML development, and it has more features and more functionality, obviously, than the free version. And then BIML Flex, which is a framework, a BIML framework. So I was looking at the page for that. They go, I don't know if they've been updating it recently or not, but I hadn't looked in a while, and I saw some different stuff. But they're doing everything in BIML with this new release. I'm excited.
Oh, that's very cool. We'll have to do a deep dive on BIML.
We will.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, we do several types of shows, and we are data driven at Data Driven, and we look. Boom. Oh wait, I had the actual thing. We have several different types of shows. If you're a regular subscriber, we're not going to bore you with all the descriptions, but if you're not a regular subscriber, we basically kind of do data points, which are quick 5-10 minute shows, and we also do deep dives, and we also do primarily interview shows like this. Speaking of which, we have a very patient guest. Andy could read the bio straight from LinkedIn, but he is a C-level executive now, but we know him way back when in the Northern Virginia, Central Virginia developer community as a Blend, Silverlight, and WPF expert. Super smart guy. We both worked at the same company twice, although one time at the same time. I actually recommended him for the job he had at Microsoft. Where he got to do some very interesting stuff. And there's even a selfie or two with some political figures that he can maybe talk about or not talk about, depending on how he feels. But he's a longtime technologist. He was at a company for a good number of years, did a lot of good work in the community, building out Silverlight, building out user groups on LinkedIn. And am I missing anything, Andy? I feel like I am.
Well, he did a lot at that one company on, and he was kind of early into the geospatial stuff. I would say that he was an MVP.
That's right.
Blend MVP for a while. I'm looking at the bio. I'm not. This is stuff I'm remembering about Joel. He's also a really, really nice guy. I don't say that often. If I don't say it, it either means I forgot, or maybe you're just not that nice. One of the two. But I'm going to play the turning 55 card here again. It's just let's chalk it up to forgetting because that's easier to forgive.
That's funny. He's a great guy. Welcome to the show, Joel Cochran. How's it going, Joel?
Great, guys. Thank you. And Andy, I'll accept about 50% of what you said. I'll deny the other 50%. So, but here's the thing: I'm not telling anyone which 50%. So.
Oh,
well, there you go. Now there you go.
So that sounds like a man who works in the political space.
Who, me?
Yes, you.
I do sort of. I don't know how to answer that. No, I have.
Oh, very well played.
Thank you.
I wish there was an applause sound effect. I would just.
I don't accept the premise of the question. I think that's the correct response to that.
Now you have to say thank you very much for the question,
and now let me talk about something completely different. Right. So I work really in the periphery of the political space, which is fortunate because it means I don't really and by don't really I mean never deal directly with, say, public figures or candidates or anything of that nature. I have had the odd experience once in a while where I've gotten to meet some of those folks, but that's sort of the extent of that. And so the work that I did at Microsoft and the work that I do with a company that I'm doing now supports that environment, but isn't directly part of the political process.
That's fair. That's fair. So I actually saw you, I think, on TV briefly running around. Was it the Iowa caucus in 2016?
Yeah, actually, probably the most interesting thing I've ever gotten to be involved with for professional reasons. The Microsoft, for folks who may not be aware, Microsoft was heavily invested in the Iowa caucuses in 2016. The team that I was on wrote and was responsible for training and deploying and then kind of managing a series of applications that were used on both sides of the aisle during the Iowa caucuses in 2016 to ensure the integrity of the event. And then outside of my team, Microsoft also built and hosted the communications center. So all of the video that you saw, all the interviews that you saw, live streaming of interviews that went out over Skype across the planet to other countries, because there were a whole bunch of other countries, of course, sent reporters to the event. And all that was built, hosted, and run by Microsoft. And so I got to be on the ground for that, and it was really, really exciting stuff.
Yeah, it was. I worked 2 offices down from Joel, and the stuff that they were doing was pretty interesting. I remember one time I saw you in the office, and you had this crazy machine learning model up on your screen, and I just looked at it. I was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I'm doing." And you said, "I was like, my first thought was, is that even possible?" and then you said, "Well, we'll find out."
So. I can't take responsibility for that. I'm sure someone smarter than me wrote that. But yeah, there's some great guys up in Boston, actually, that worked for Microsoft that were helping us write some machine learning algorithms and also train some of our customers on how to do that. And so in the 2016 election cycle, there were a number of companies that were deploying predictive modeling through Azure Machine Learning. So that was really cool.
Interesting. And I think we've seen kind of certainly since 2008 and 2012, and when we start picking apart 2016, we'll kind of see how much of our politics are driven by data.
Absolutely, it's the key. It's really the key to everything, and it really goes all the way back to 2000. 2000 was the first campaign cycle. Excuse me, let me say that again. 2000 was the first campaign cycle that really leveraged data in the kind, in sort of a recognizable format, the way that you would think of it today. People on the ground collecting data and posting it to a central location, and then it being picked up and someone doing some kind of analysis over it to inform bigger decisions. In not exactly in real time, right? But close enough.
Well, what counted for real time in 2000?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, right. Certainly much faster than they had before, and so the Bush campaign in 2000 was very progressive in that regard, and that's a funny joke to folks who are in politics, and not funny at all to people who don't live in my world. So. And then they did, they sort of kind of continued in 2004 what they did in 2000, not as well. And then Obama's campaign in 2008 really picked up the ball and just shoved it downfield, right? I mean, they were the first ones to really engage with social media, whereas the Republicans sort of, they learned their lessons, but they didn't increase their knowledge, right? So they sort of lagged behind in 2008, and the results are obvious, right? Obama won, fairly handily in modern, according to modern standards, right? And a lot of that was driven by the use of data, the use of information, the use of technology, and back then the beginnings of what became predictive modeling for politics.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I do presentations still at user groups and SQL Saturdays, and I think they announced the past summit speakers today as we were recording this, and I think I was picked because I see a bunch of social media tagging me and stuff. So anyway, one of my slides is about data engineering, data wrangling, data munging, and a quote from Lars Nielsen's book Unicorns Among Us, where he says that it's 50 to 80% of the work. And my next image that I superimpose over this page from the book is, I ask people, what can you do if we get this right? And I say, we can change the world. And it's a story from CNN 2012, President Obama's reelection campaign. And the quote in there is that they ran the election, simulated the election 66,000 times a night.
That's impressive. That is definitely impressive. It
is. It's part of the reason you were hanging out in Iowa in 2016, because the rumor that I heard between 2014 and 2016 was that that guy went around telling that story a lot, not just to CNN. And he mentioned that they did it on IBM hardware. And Microsoft basically said, we want whoever wins to say we did it on Microsoft hardware. And so they got a little more engaged, I think, in the 2016 election.
Well, we were definitely engaged. I don't know what the generation of that was, right, or what the original motivation was. But by the time I came on board, yeah, we were heavily engaged, and we got a lot of accolades. Yeah. And again, all this is from both sides of the aisle, right? We got a lot of accolades because some of these folks had been around in previous cycles and had been burned by other companies. I'm not going to name names, and I'm not trying to diss anyone, but it was the first time that an organization like Microsoft had really invested the proper resources into supporting an effort like this, right? So it was really a new paradigm. I mean, no one else had done anything like at this level and offered this kind of support, and again, in a very bipartisan way.
Right, and I think it's important because whenever you mention politics, particularly at the, I think we talked about this, the news cycle, the way things are, at least in the U.S., there's this versus that. There's not the notion of doing something for the civic good has been kind of lost to history, and Microsoft is always very conscious to make sure that they treated everybody equally in terms of the political engagement. I remember I was in a public sector role prior to the team's creation, and we were trying to I was on the periphery of kind of supporting some of the work for the conventions in the 2012 cycle, and it was just pretty clear, it was amazing how not technically savvy that space in general was. And then ultimately Microsoft kind of crafted in 2016, let's do this big and let's do this seriously. And then but by fortune or fate or destiny, I ended up on that on part of that team that ultimately Joel ended up on. And by the way, Joel, I got the referral bonus for them hiring Joel. So, and that was.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. That was my '76 Eldorado convertible money right there.
Nice.
Yeah, every time I see the car, I'm like, yeah. Yes, thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Joel.
Always happy to lend a hand. So.
No, but it was great. I mean, I think you had you had tried to work interview at Microsoft in the past, and just for one reason or the other, it didn't work out. And then you were also kind of caught up in the Silverlight apocalypse.
So I will claim a small bit of prescience in that regard. Accidental though it may have been. Yes, we were doing a lot of XAML work. I was really more focused on WPF than Silverlight, but we were doing some Silverlight stuff, and it was a struggle. I mean, Silverlight was a great platform, don't get me wrong, but it was kind of a struggle, and we sort of ended up falling backwards into MVC, to doing ASP.NET. Became very heavily invested in JavaScript, spending tons and tons of time on JavaScript, to the point where I was doing all-day workshops trying to teach other C# developers how not to hate JavaScript. And so I was already in that space, and I'd done less and less Silverlight when the whole Windows 8 thing kind of killed XAML, right? Killed Blend. So Blend, as Frank mentioned Blend earlier, and there aren't many people around who really knew Blend very well, and I was one of the 5 or 6 of them. So, I have very fond memories of Blend in particular.
Yeah. So for those of you who are listening and have no idea what we're talking about, Blend was a design tool, user interface design tool, I guess you could call it, that would generate XAML for you.
Yes, and Microsoft developed it. It was a fantastic tool. It really was. I literally wrote a book on it, and Microsoft built it and marketed it and thought of it as a designer's tool, trying to appeal to that market of folks who usually work in things like Adobe and and other such products. And of course, those are 800-pound gorilla products. There's, they weren't really going to break into that space, which they didn't realize. But what I realized was that it was a fantastic developer's tool for developing the UI, because it's something that traditionally developers are not known for, is their great UI development skills. And the cool thing about Blend is that it really appealed to the developer in me, that it let me do those things without having to really kind of be a dyed-in-the-wool developer type. So and it integrated great with Visual Studio, and it was wonderful. It was a really, really nice package that ended up on the cutting room floor. It is still technically deployed, but it's nothing today like what I remember it being, 10 years ago.
Right. So as someone who then made the switch from kind of the client-side development to data science, did you want to talk about that? Like how you made the switch?
Sure. So I want to be completely fair, and I understand this is the data-driven podcast. I am a data-driven developer. I don't think of myself as a data scientist, because I've met real, honest-to-goodness data scientists, and those guys are crazy smart, and they do things that I don't understand. I like to think that I probably do things that they don't understand too, but the things that they do are far more impressive. And so I don't elevate myself to that level. However, my career's had a weird kind of trajectory that looks like a calculus graph. I've spent years doing UI work, and that's really what folks in the community knew me for when I was really active in the community. And it was whether it was teaching people how to write JavaScript and pushing things out to the front end, or whether it was Blend so that you could develop WPF apps, or even long before I got involved in the Microsoft community, I started my career as an RPG developer in the AS400. And I was known in that community for kind of pushing the boundaries of what you can do in a 24/80 text screen. And I wrote a bunch of articles about how to improve the user experience, through things that weren't really widely used, like windowing systems and pop-up menus. And subfiles, and at this point I'm getting into things that absolutely nobody else on the call will understand.
So when you say RPG, was that role-playing game or something else?
Rocket propelled grenade. Yeah, that's always.
Well, that was my first guess,
but
I figured. So you were a game developer, or no? Am I completely off base?
No. Oh, no. I'm sorry. I thought you were kidding, because I was kidding. No, RPG was Report Program Generator. It's a language that, believe it or not, started in the 60s at IBM. It's an IBM proprietary language. And it's gone through several revisions, and it's, of course, much more modern now than it was then. But it has this columnar design to it, both in the coding experience and in the visual UI experience, because it's all text. It doesn't support Direct, doesn't natively support, at least I shouldn't say did not. I have no idea what it does now, because I haven't looked at it in a long time. But RPG is this tiny little crazy productive business language. So it only had like 50 keywords, but it was integrated into the AS400 operating system. As was the database. So when you got a machine, the operating system and the database and the programming environment were just there. And so, as an RPG developer, the first thing that you learn is open file inside your code. And what that means is connect to a database table. So file in AS400 speak means table. So the very first thing you learn how to do is talk to a database, and every program that you write talks to a database. And I never saw an RPG program that didn't talk to the database. So I did that for years before I got into Java and PHP and eventually C# and some other languages. And all of those, they all lacked in my mind because they didn't have this concept of a native connection to the database. It was one of the hardest things, besides the fact that RPG is a procedural language. And of course, everything else that we deal with today is pretty much object oriented. And so that was my first huge paradigm shift, right? It was shifting away from IBM land into the bigger world, right? And and I discovered things like ODBC. Oh, I can connect to other databases. Wait, what? What's this? What is this SQL thing that you talk of? And so that was not the first thing. Where a lot of folks learn C# first, or they learn Java first, and then they learn databases later. When you're an IBM or RPG developer, you learn databases first. So I've always been a database first or a data first developer, regardless of what kind of software I'm building at the time. So I've always had, I think, a closer connection to data and data operations than your typical developer has. And so when the opportunity came up to do more than just application development, right? And again, this was part of my role at Microsoft, starting to support agencies who are dealing with larger data. Customers who were trying to do machine learning.
Right.
But the interesting thing is that those folks, by and large, in that world, are not developers, right? They're not software guys. They're political guys who came to data as a tool. Whereas I'm a data guy who develops software, and now I have this sort of expertise that they don't have. And if we can merge these things together, they can do some really interesting work. And so that was sort of how I ended up, in a company today whose primary focus is big data, right? Is data analytics.
Interesting.
Well, you guys do a lot of demographics data, right?
We leverage a lot of it. Yeah. We're not an originator. We're not a data originator, but we collect data from a bunch of different sources, and then we synthesize. We analyze, we do a lot of predictive modeling. We do a lot of demographics analytics, a lot of geographic analytics.
Right.
So yeah, that's all kind of part and parcel of modern political data.
So to use the data as the new oil analogy, you're a refinery, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy, because the raw data a lot of times is not very useful.
Right.
And even just extracting a subset of that data that's appropriate to the question that you're trying to ask can be really challenging. We have give or take 300 terabytes of data at any one time that we're actively working with.
Wow.
So it's not like you could just, open up SSMS and write a select statement. It just doesn't work that way, as anybody else I know who's listening works with big data understands, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think of us as a factory. We take in the raw components of the data. We refine the data, and then at the end of it, we produce something else that's actually consumable and usable by our customers.
Interesting. So you that's kind of your value add, if you will. It's kind of like an interesting place in the ecosystem.
Yeah. So our motto basically is, and they adopted AI before I got there. I'll throw my friends at the company under the bus a little bit, but it's actionable intelligence.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Yeah. So that's sort of the company motto or the company logo. No, don't use logo. That's the company motto. Okay. Is that is actionable intelligence, and the idea behind that, of course, is that anyone can run queries. We're going to give you information that you can actually do something with, and then we kind of take it one step further in our relationship with our customers, and we will actually tell them what the data means and how to leverage it in their current situation.
Interesting. So, how did you get started with data science? Or I know you don't call yourself a data scientist, but clearly you're probably more like an AI engineer or an ML engineer. How did you, if I don't know if you like hipster terms or whatever, but
I don't. I'm too old for that. I don't do the whole hipster thing. Basically, so my first real exposure to machine learning was again at Microsoft. With really the first version of AML, right, of Azure Machine Learning, and I sat down with some of the guys who were engineers on the machine learning team, and they actually taught me, how machine learning works, and so I understand testing models and training models, and I understand evaluations. And the thing that in particular that I like about Azure machine learning is that, all those algorithms are just there, and you drag and drop and create a pipeline and adjust a couple settings, like a lot of other great Microsoft products. Right. That's, it's built in that kind of environment. And Causeway, the company that I work for now, when I was at Microsoft, Causeway was running near the end of the 2016 cycle. I think it was 1.5 million rows a day of data through Azure Machine Learning. Wow. Right. Wow. So they were, it was really, really heavily used. It was active, and it was actually part of a real world scenario. So, So that was sort of how I got into machine learning, and I gave some talks on kind of intro to machine learning, again, really at a high level, because I don't think I could do, because I don't have the math and statistics background. I don't think I could sit down and write those algorithms. But the beautiful thing is I don't have to, right? Because they're there already, and they're encapsulated for me. And I do know enough to understand what linear regression is and what multiple regression is. And the environment for Azure Machine Learning makes it really easy for you to test out different paths and then just deploy the one that gives you the best results. Yeah. So that was sort of my entry into machine learning. And that's as close as I get to data science, what I really think of as data science. Most of the other work that I do is data wrangling. And really, there are smarter people at our company who do that stuff. What I really tried to do is supply them with the tools and the technology and solve problems and create processes. And now we're moving very heavily into an automation cycle, right, where we're trying to take these really complicated processes that have to go through many steps and layers, and to automate those through things like the Azure Data Factory, and we're getting also really heavily into serverless computing. So we're starting to leverage logic apps and Azure functions, and there's just a lot of really awesome stuff out there right now that with my development background, I'm able to bring to the table, so that, again, these people who really understand the analytics and who are really closer to data scientists can do more with their time.
Very cool. So you've talked a lot about the history, how you got into it, and you've been doing it for, I'd say, more than a couple of years, a few years now. And
at least six. At least
yeah,
six.
Okay, great. So, I mean, you kind of see it evolve. You've seen it evolve, right? So where do you see it going?
So there's probably, leveraging cognitive services, I think is sort of the next big step. I was just at the Build conference a couple weeks ago, and I got to spend a little bit of time with the guys on the media indexer team. And media indexing has been around, for a while now. A couple jobs ago, I worked at a company where we built a video player. We didn't actually build the player. We built a system that leveraged someone else's player, but
Right.
But the service was delivering videos to paying customers. And at that time, we were working with Microsoft to test out this thing that they had called Mavis, and it's an acronym for something that I don't remember what the M and the A stand for. Some kind of analytics, and then the VIS part was video indexing service. So this was a really early version of what eventually became Azure Media Indexer. And what it does is it leverages, under the covers, behind the scenes, it leverages machine learning. And today's version, I'm sure, is leveraging cognitive services to analyze audio and now video. And you can go, by the way, to video.ai. They just released this recently, and test it out for yourself. And you can upload a video, and it will spit out, it'll churn for a little bit, and it'll spit out an index of all the text, all the speech that's in the video, a transcript that you can easily transcribe to other languages, that you can translate to other languages and download the VTT files, which is how closed captioning works on video, the VTT files. So, and it will do things like allow you to find, let's say that there's a reference in the video to Facebook or some other well-known brand. It will actually find all the references to those brands, and you can click on them and jump through the video.
Wow.
Yeah, and then one of the examples that they have, one of the labels that comes up is airplane. It's a news broadcast, and there's a picture of an airplane in the video, and it lets you push that button and jump to that frame in the video. And there's tons of, and I'm not doing the product or the service justice, right? But there's a lot of work going on there in media indexing. And so I see being able to consume live and streaming content like that. If you think of the nature of a political campaign, not to be stuck in my own domain, but if you think the nature of a political campaign is more and more what's happening right now,
Right.
And so being able to analyze that and doing sentiment analysis over it, and maybe automatically crafting and drafting responses, right? Or notifying someone that, hey, there was just a report, a really negative report about our candidate on WKRP in Cincinnati or whatever. So, so there's a lot of really interesting, and cognitive services, of course, is what makes all that stuff possible. So I think there's some really interesting stuff that's already possible, but I'm not sure whether or not anyone is really leveraging it yet.
Interesting. So what is your favorite part of your current gig?
The favorite part of my current gig, so having worked in a really small company, and then a couple medium-sized companies, and then a really big company, and I'm back in a really small company now, my favorite part is probably the environment. So we're less than 10 people, but we're tackling these really big, challenging problems, and not just big in terms of size of data, right? But the amount of work that we're trying to get done, right? So just like everyone else, we only have so many hours in the day, and we only have so many resources. And that's where that, when I talk about automation, and I talk about, I haven't actually mentioned Azure Data Lake yet, right? Which is our primary data processing technology these days, but the things we can do with Data Lake that take minutes today versus hours, or even literally sometimes days, just, a year or two ago, so that's what I think is really cool. We've got a bunch of really smart, talented, dedicated people. We're all driven to succeed, and that kind of environment. It's almost it's a very startup-y like. And it promotes experimentation. It allows failure because it understands that it's an inherent aspect of progress, right? So, and I think personally, I just really thrive in that kind of environment.
That's really cool. There's nothing like that feeling of being like on the main nerve, so to speak, and just living on the cutting edge. So we have a few complete this sentence. When I am not working, I enjoy blank.
I do enjoy blank. I love a good blank.
There goes our iTunes rating, Andy. No, okay.
So,
darn it.
So when I'm not working, this is gonna sound crazy. I enjoy not working. And what that's a little pithy way of saying that, I think it's really important that we find time away from the screens, that we, when I was younger, of course, and I was still trying to kind of cut my teeth on technology and learn my way, I'd spend a lot of my free time reading books, which for millennials on the podcast, that was how we used to consume the internet before the internet.
So it's like a Kindle then.
We read books. But I did. Yeah, absolutely. That's I know, I understand. But so I really enjoy getting away from it. And so, when I'm done and I have my office, and when I'm done working for the day, I leave my office and I shut the door and the computer stays in the office. And so towards that end, I try to do things that are not really technology heavy, and I have a personal tendency to be very obsessive about my hobbies. So, over the years, I've gone through a series of kind of end all be all hobbies. Like I've spent all of my free time playing golf for a number of years. And that's actually happened several times to me. I play bluegrass music, or I did, incessantly for a few years. I was a Boy Scout leader for a few years, and that's every night I was off doing some scouting event or at a retreat, or we're going camping, or, but all of those have, they share, again, that quality of not being technology driven, of allowing me to kind of separate my work life from my home life. So today that obsession is playing pool. That's how I spend most of my free time. Yeah. And if I'm not playing it, I'm studying it, reading books or watching videos or doing training or.
Now I've got to ask, Joel, what in the world? I thought pool was about physics. I mean, what is it that you're studying here? How to sucker somebody in? You shoot off the first two games, and then you get them to bet big. Is that what the books are about, Joel?
It's all about double or nothing. No, the books you mentioned physics. Yeah, there's an alarming amount of physics that's involved. It's not just simple angles. You have things like friction and humidity, the quality of the cloth, and the humidity that's in the air. And I mean, all these things actually come into play. And then the physics of two balls striking each other. It's not just because I hit you here, you'll go in that direction. That's actually too simplistic. There are things called throw. It's actually surprisingly complex. And there's a couple brilliant people out there who are doing actual scientific research and study about it, and they publish a lot of their findings. And so,
wow,
yeah. And then there's the physical skill. It sounds super simple, but the physical skill of making a stick go in a straight line is surprisingly difficult, especially to do consistently. And then making sure that straight line is actually on the aim that you want it to go on, on the correct path and trajectory. And then you have to understand how the balls react. So when I hit this ball at that angle, well, the cue ball has to go somewhere, and there's physics involved in that. And it's just, it just goes on and on and on. And it's one of the few games I think that I'll never grow weary of the challenge of it. Right. And I will also never succeed. I will never, achieve the level of ability that I would like.
So you're saying you don't think you'll ever turn into Harrisonburg Fats?
The fat part I've already got. I've got that part down. Yep.
So I'll have to explain for our younger listeners, and we have a lot of people. I don't know if you know this, Joel. We recently hit 50,000 downloads.
Wow!
And we're still not a year old at the date of this recording, and we actually.
I should have asked for double my fee.
Oh, there you go. 2 times nothing is still nothing. Double and nothing.
That's right. Speaking of double or nothing. But yeah, 52,000 earlier today, which it's been and we haven't put out a lot of material in the past few days. That kills us. Content's king in this. But the reference I made to Harrisonburg Fats was really about Minnesota Fats, who was a famous pool player back when I was a young man, which was a long time ago, when the years used to begin with the number 1.
So hush. So since you brought it up, I'll give a little bit of trivia, because I also love pool history and trivia. Minnesota Fats changed that's of course his nickname. The man's real name was Rudolph Wanderone, and he was an unremarkable pool player. He was really a showman, and he kind of garnered a reputation because he took the name Minnesota Fats after the movie, the 1961 classic, The Hustler, where Jackie Gleason played a character called Minnesota Fats. And so he took that name because of the popularity of the movie, and it really bolstered his career, again, as an entertainer. And then he had a very famous feud, if you will, with Willie Mosconi, who was quite probably the best player who ever lived. And so he sort of very publicly created this this rivalry, this unreal rivalry between the two, because anytime that they actually played, Mosconi just killed him. But anyway, so that's my Minnesota Fats story for you. Before that, one of his several nicknames was New York Fats. And then, man, as far as I know, he'd never actually been to Minnesota.
The Wikipedia page says that he was born in New York City.
That is interesting.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And he was one of those guys, by the way, who would, after a couple games, say, well, let's double the bet. After losing a couple games, so.
Well, the only person on this show that's from anywhere near New York is Frank.
Yep, that would be me.
Yeah, I don't know, Frank. I mean, that sounds a little stereotypical to me, to be picking on our brothers from New York. I don't know. They're not like
Frank
that. Frank
doesn't want to answer that question.
There's a reason why.
We have a lot of people listening to the show in New York City. I actually ran into a few this weekend. I was up in New York City, and yes, I don't think I was trying to set Frank up. He artfully and properly did not answer the question, which is appropriate.
See, I also worked on K Street.
It's very appropriate that we're talking about politics on this show. And Frank,
yes, Andy, thank you very much for your question. Now let's talk about.
I do have another question for you, Joel. To complete this sentence, I think the coolest thing in technology today is
it's serverless computing. So I talked a little bit earlier about Azure Functions and Logic Apps, right? So like if I want to create an API, I can do that in Azure Functions. It's all REST-based stuff that will do things. And an example, as a matter of fact, I tweeted about it this morning, was that yesterday I wrote a blob. So we deal a lot with Azure blob storage,
right.
So if you drop a blob in a container, you can actually set it up to fire events. And so a blob creation event and a blob deletion event from a blob storage container will fire, and you can process that with Event Grid. or in our case, we did that with Logic App. So I wrote a Logic App that only executes when a new blob is dropped into a container. And then it takes that blob and it passes the URL to an Azure function. The Azure function looks up that storage account's connection string in Azure Key Vault, and then it connects to the blob storage, and then it looks up the blob and it creates a SAS token, a secure access signature, and it pins that token to the URL and then sends it back to the Logic App. And then the Logic App emails that to someone or executes a webhook call to some other service or something of that nature. And that's something that in the past, we would have to manually go and do all of those steps. But now with again, these automated pipelines and serverless computing, I can have that happen, and I don't have to pay to have an API up and running 24/7. I don't have to have something on a scheduler that goes and pulls that container, once an hour or whatever to see if there's anything new in there. It just happens, and so there's a ton of things that become possible and affordable in that kind of environment. So to me, that's sort of the coolest thing that's happening right now, is that we really are getting to the point where I don't think anymore about VMs, and I don't think anymore about servers and patching and updates and deployments and all that kind of stuff. I think about writing code. I think about solving problems.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting paradigm shift, isn't it?
It really is. And paradigm shift is absolutely correct. So, I spent the last couple weeks since Build sort of finally turned I mentally turned the corner on this whole concept. I spent the last couple weeks studying about microservices and the cons and the architectural concerns around those and the problems that they're trying to solve. And it's a completely different way of thinking about writing applications. So yeah, paradigm shift is absolutely the right way to think of it.
We have another complete this sentence. I look forward to the day when I can use technology to blank.
So I don't actually know how to answer that, because in my mind, technology is best when it's invisible. I'm an odd duck technologist, right? Like I'm not really a gadget guy, and I don't like technology for technology's sake. I also don't dislike technology for technology's sake, right? I try to be very agnostic about technology. So I don't care too much about me using technology. So there's nothing in particular that I want to do with technology. What I want is for technology to allow, again, really smart people to do things like cure cancer, solve problems with the global water supply, and I want technology, and I think, artificial intelligence and machine learning and, and deep neural networks can solve a lot of these problems. And that's what I want. I want to see technology do those things. I don't care if I'm doing it. As a matter of fact, it shouldn't be that I'm doing it. I shouldn't have to do anything. The result of the thing should just be there and be pervasive to the culture. So that's sort of how I think of that. I don't care about technology. Like I said, I'm almost an anti-technologist. The ideal technology in my mind is a technology I don't have to do anything with. That's another reason why I love, back to the whole serverless thing, right? And again, these automated pipelines is I don't want to have to go in and do stuff. I just want it to work. I just want it to happen. So right. On a lighter note, I do want a transporter and replicator from Star Trek. And I want a lightsaber from Star Wars. So if I could have those three things, you can keep the jetpack. I want those things.
Makes sense. So share something different about yourself, but do remember, we'd like to keep our iTunes clean rating and let folks listen to this podcast while they're in the car with their family.
No problem. I'm a very PG kind of guy. I've actually spent the last couple years working on a Juris Master degree in American legal studies. And the first question that everyone who's listening to this is thinking is, what the heck is that? I call it law school light. It is a law degree, and it's from a law school. However, I will not be I will not be qualified to sit for the bar or to practice law or do anything of that nature. It's really the philosophical and academic study of the law, the history of the law, and why we have how the law works, and why we have the laws that we have today, and especially the common law history that goes back to the 1600s in England, and that we still live under today in the U.S. So I've spent the last couple of years doing that. I started it when I was at Microsoft because I was working in the legal affairs division, and I thought it would be a really nice career booster, if I stayed there at the company. That ended up not happening, but I enjoy the content enough that I'm finishing it on my own.
Oh, very cool.
And so I started my final class yesterday. So in a couple months, I will actually graduate and get my degree, and then
nice.
And then as a reward to myself for finally finishing, this fall I'm going to get my professional billiards instructor certification.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah. So those are two kind of different things about me, I guess.
Awesome.
I don't know. They sound related and dangerously so.
I don't. We can.
Well, if we see him rolling up in a Bugatti or a Lamborghini, then we'll know.
That's what I'm thinking. It's like you think that you won this pool tournament, but let me explain to you why you did not. And that's a precedent from 1609.
Very nice.
So, where can people learn more about you, Joel?
Well, we should talk about social media.
Okay, let's talk about social media.
I used to be let's talk about social media. I used to be super active on Twitter in particular. And if you can find me on social media at all, that's where it's going to be today. I did delete my Facebook account. And unfortunately, it has the appearance of being because of the recent hubbub and Zuckerberg being at Congress and all that kind of stuff. But the truth is, I actually tried to delete it a couple years ago. And I was still using Windows Phone at the time. And for those of you on the call who have no idea what I'm talking about, Microsoft used to have a phone operating system on really nice devices with a fantastic user interface called Windows Phone. And I would bet money that Frank here knows exactly what I'm talking about. It was a great platform that just didn't succeed. But I'm sorry, I'm digressing. So my story about Facebook is that I tried to delete it, but at the time, Microsoft's Windows Phone operating system was very tightly integrated with your Facebook account, and that's where your contacts and things came from. So I did turn off. I managed to deactivate my account several years ago, and as soon as I did, my Windows Phone became virtually useless. So I ended up reactivating it. And then I've been on iPhone for about a year now, and I realized, I don't need that Facebook thing anymore. So I did actually, I went in and deactivated it. So I'm not on Facebook anymore. My big problem with social media in general is that it's redefined things like what it means to be a friend and what it means to like something and what it's changed the terminology. And I'm just old enough and fuddy-duddy enough that that really bothers me, because words have meanings and communication should be more direct and personal. And so I've drifted away from social media over the last few years, and that's my little rant on social media. So if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter, and I will occasionally pop in and see what's going on there, and I tweet once in a while. And you can find me on LinkedIn.
So you don't have a blog anymore? Did you shut that down?
So you can go to joelcochran.com, and I think 2013 or 14 might be the last thing that was out there. I had a really, really popular blog back when blogs were something called developingfor.net. And it's still up because people still use those old articles all the time. The videos don't work. Not the video. I'm sorry. The images don't work because I had a server crash. There's actually one of the last blog posts about that. But the articles are still out there. So I technically have two blogs, neither of which I pay any attention to. So I've actually started a thing inside of Causeway where we're going to try and produce more technical content for folks. So if you go to causewaysolutions.com, on the blog there's a couple blog posts, and like the most recent one that I wrote maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago is about how to set up a linked service to Azure Data Lake from Azure Data Factory for use, in Azure Data Factory, which is a surprisingly onerous thing to do. Whereas it's really easy to connect to SQL Server or blob storage or virtually anything else, but it's really a bear to get it set up originally for Data Lake.
Oh, wow.
But that's working, and so there's a really long step-by-step guideline in how to do that. And so we want to start pushing out a lot of content like that.
Very good.
And then I speak about three or 4 or 5 times a year at various events, and so you might run into me at a conference or a user group or something, but nothing on the order of what I used to.
Oh, okay. So are you into audiobooks at all?
No, I actually read paper.
What?
On my Kindle.
That's crazy.
On my Kindle. I read paper on my Kindle. I do both. I do both. I do about 50% paper, actual physical paper, and I do about 50% Kindle.
I think you were the guy whose Kindle I first saw, because I was very skeptical.
I've had them for years. I've actually been a big fan of the Kindle concept. This is my 3rd or 4th one, but my Kindle is a Paperwhite, so I don't use a Fire. I don't have an Android tablet. I don't have an iPad. When I'm not working, I try really hard to get away from that kind of stuff. I do spend too much time on my phone. Yeah. So it's one thing I learned switching from Windows Phone to iPhone is that there really is an interesting world of apps and stuff out there. So
I know.
So I have to eat my own words a little bit in that regard. And it's funny that family time is now my wife and I will sit together in the living room and we're both playing the same game on our cell phones.
Oh, that's funny.
That sometimes counts as family time. But.
There you go. Well, if you ever did want to explore the wonderful world of audiobooks, Audible is a sponsor of ours, and they've hooked up our listeners with a free audiobook, so you can take advantage of this. URL to take advantage of that is thedatadrivenbook.com. Is that correct, Andy?
That's correct. thedatadrivenbook.com.
So there you go. You get one free book. Even you could use that, Joel.
I could.
They don't discriminate.
They don't discriminate. They don't ask. They don't ask paper or
don't ask, don't tell.
Paper or electric. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's a number of books we really have enjoyed on there. I am currently listening to Be Obsessed or Be Average again for like the 10th time. And I think we both finished up Crushing It by Gary Vaynerchuk, which is pretty interesting.
We did, and I started listening to Be Obsessed or Be Average too, and it's just one of those books. It's going to be one. I think I also listened to Crush It again after listening to Crushing It twice, and again Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone. I find those types of success books very inspirational, and the reason I have an Alexa Spot is because of some material in Crushing It that Gary V mentioned.
Yeah, that's true. That's got some big plans. So actually, Joel, you may not have known this, but you are I guess what we're going to call our 2nd season. You're the first guest of the 2nd season.
Woohoo! Hashtag first.
Hashtag first.
There
That's
you
right.
Go.
So with that, any parting words of wisdom, Joel?
Nope. That was it. That was all my wisdom.
That was it. I'll add crickets in post-production.
That would be awesome. That would be great. No parting words of wisdom, but I really enjoyed catching up with you guys, and it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, thanks for having us, and we'll let the nice British lady finish the show.
Thanks for listening to Data Driven. Don't just listen, become a data driver by going to datadriven.tv to sign up to join the community, access to special events, tips and tricks, and more. Sign up today at datadriven.tv.